Yeah, we sat down and we cried when we remembered Jerusalem. We were sick, Lord, near to dying. Oh,
Shalom, shalom, family. Welcome to another Tanakh review. My name is Zurishaddai, one of the teachers of congregation D.C.B, CHOKMAH, located in the Red Hook section of Brooklyn, New York. Giving all honor, glory, and praise to the Most High, King of the universe, Yehudah, for life, food, clothing, and shelter, wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. Thanking all you for joining us once again today. I'd like to wish everyone an early Shabbat Shalom, and praying that the Most High God, creator of heaven and earth, will continue to bless each and every one of you. Praying that the Most High God be with those who are destitute, the lowly, the poor, the needy, the fatherless, the widow, that the Most High God will hear their cries and their supplications. Giving all due respect to the leader of our place, even my brother Chief Prince Yediel Ben Yissaskar. Also thanking the Most High God for the life of his family, his wife, Princess Shekinah, and all those that he loved. Praying that the Most High God be with us all. All of you who listen on a weekly basis, we just ask you to don't forget to like, to subscribe, and to share the link whenever possible. So, like I said, once again, early Shabbat Shalom to everyone. Also, don't forget August 31st will be our 10th year anniversary celebration, which will be held at Top Civic Center in Brooklyn. For more information on that, you can reach to us or reach for us at 347-622-9090. And also you can reach us at our email, info@dcb.org. That's one of our future events that will be happening during Labor Day weekend. So thank you all once again, and I pray that the Most High, creator of heaven and earth, be with you all, protect you and keep you. At this time, we're going to move straight ahead, and I'm going to pass it on to one of my teachers and one of my mentors, even Nasik Zurishaddai ben Yehudah, so he could proceed with the portion of Chuquat today. How are you, Nasik?
Great, Brother Hashem. First of all, I give praises to the Supreme Intelligence in the universe, God of my forefathers, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, to respect to the platform I'm on, the D.C.B channel platform. Spiritual leader, Chief Prince Yeriel Ben Saska, to the host, Chief Uzael, to the Princess Chief, Brother and Sister Kohanim, Rabbinate, Maureen, book visits to the channel. Greet you all in the tongue of my forefathers. Shalom Aleichem and early Shabbat Shalom. And I like to say, Adonai Septati Takupi Yogi Tiatheka Olo to my lips. And mouth should declare that praise. We'll be picking up now in Chukat, which is actually literally means statues, which is one of the things you really can't figure out, but I'm gonna stop mankind from trying to figure it out and come up with a reason for certain things. And it starts. It starts from the 19th chapter of the Numbers, and they continue all the way to the end of the 22nd chapter, first verse, in the Masoretic text. All right, so 22nd chapter, first verse, in the Masoretic text is where it ends. Now, normally, Chukat and Balak. And it's usually together, in a bunch, together. So it used to be a double stitch rope, but this one of the times that it's separate. So about Chukat by itself, and then deal with Balak next week. What's interesting is that as I've spoken on in the past, that you have laws, you have what you call chukim, which is statutes or laws with, defined reasoning. And I gave you some examples of that, and this can be one of them. And, some other examples are just like, eating clean and unclean, the difference of eating, what they consider kosher animals as opposed to, eating non-clean animals. And also, we have adoops, which is testimonies, those things is such like the Pesach, those give terms to our history, Shavuot, so to speak, and then also Sukkot. So those is things like other nations which I explained in the past, such as like you just passed through a thing called Independence Day for America. So they have a celebration of their history and Declaration of Independence and all that. So all nations have that. And they got mishpatim, which is civil laws, laws that we also can understand and rationalize, because we know a society, if you have a bunch of stealing going on in society, and the society was only thing was this, and that society would be chaos. So that being said, I'm gonna jump right into it, because it's a couple exciting topics of interest that bear a lot of discussion, and quite a few things I'm gonna leave to you and your colleagues and your teachers to discuss in this here, because it's very extensive, even though it's short, basically 87 pasukim, which is verses and stuff like that, in the text. But it's a lot of things that bear a lot of discussion, and it bears a lot of questioning. So hopefully I could share some insight in that, and I will leave it up to you to share some, with each other, and possibly leave something in the chat on the screen that points of interest. All right, so 19th chapter of Numbers, and which is unique, because we have a fast forward, which we're gonna come to in a minute in this particular portion, which I'll speak on when we get to there. And it said, and the Lord spoke unto Moses and unto Aaron, saying, this is the statute of the law, which the Lord had commanded, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, that they bring thee a red heifer, faultless, wherein is no blemish, and upon which never came a yoke. All right, so now, what's so unique about this here thing is that a heifer, just in case most people are not familiar with the old English style, it's a cow, and not a bull, but a female cow, so, and it says red, para aduma is the Hebrew term for it. But aduma usually means reddish red, but it don't mean red like we consider red today, like the color, the primary color red, in a sense. Neither was Esau like that primary color red, but it'd be for the cows, but in that case it would be sort of like a brownish, it sounds like a brownish color, and we know that's not normally a primary color. And then questions you could discuss: why take a red cow? Why not an all black cow or an all white cow? Why just because particular color of cow? And they got reasons that people come up with, but just to consider, it chose this particular cow here, and then a female cow is opposed to that, and according to rabbinic tradition, because we don't, if it has two other colored hairs in the cow, and that means that the cow, you can find maybe a gray hair, or we could say maybe a black hair, which is so thin that, those two alone would disqualify it, according to rabbinic sources, traditional sources, as not being qualified to have, being used as for this particular ritual. And this ritual defies all kind of logic. Even Solomon in Kohelet and Ecclesiastics said he thought he was wise, but then he found out that he couldn't even figure this out, why it works the way it works when we get through reading about it. So this is some of the mysteries that, no matter how much mysteries we say defies logic, mankind gonna search things out. That's what we do. All right. So, and he never had used it for any other purpose. So if a yoke never came upon it, also it can be used for no secular thing. And you couldn't say, oh, I got one that's perfect. I need a mate, and hopefully something else will come out. It had to be pretty much a virgin, untouched. That you didn't use it for secular purposes, and if you made it, that still would be for secular purposes. So basically, it's a cow that, and what's unique about it is that it's grown. It doesn't give an age on this particular cow. So that means that you have to have a cow that grows up, reach full maturity without having to put a yoke upon it, and without it being messed around by a bull. So that's one of the things that you got to keep in mind just on at the beginning of this. And then as we go further, it says, third verse, and shall give her unto Eleazar the priest, and she shall be brought forth without the camp, and she shall be slain before his face. And Eleazar the priest shall take of her blood with his finger. Which one? And the sprinkle of her blood towards the front of the tent of meeting 7 times. And the heifer shall be burnt in his sight, her skin and her flesh and her dung. Her blood and her blood with her dung shall be burnt. And the priest shall take cedar wood and hyssop and scarlet. That's a cord, and use the scarlet to be on a wool, a piece of wool. All right. And cast it in the midst of the burning of the heifer. Then the priest shall wash his clothes, and he shall bathe his flesh in water, and afterwards he may come into the camp, and the priest shall be unclean until the evening. Now, which is interesting in here, that and the whole process, and the burning, you got wood, you got hyssop, which you use to sprinkle with, like a grass, special type of foliage, and then you have actually scarlet, a wool thread. Now, all this can be burnt. So that's part of the ingredients of producing this here thing here. And then and the priest, he becomes unclean in the process of this. Now, after that, and then goes on to say, and he should be unclean after he do this. And all he did was just sprinkle the blood, throw the stuff in the fire. And he that burneth her shall wash his clothes in water, and bathe his flesh in water, and shall be unclean until the evening. All this guy did was kindle the fire up, kept the fire going. All right, so he's unclean until the evening. And then And a man that is clean shall gather up the ashes of the heifer and lay them up without the camp in a clean place, and it shall be kept for the congregation of children of Israel for a water of sprinkling. It is a purification from sin. And he that gather the ashes of the heifer shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. And it shall be unto the children of Israel and unto the stranger that sojourneth among them for a statute forever. Now, what was interesting here, that this ashes is put up at this point. The whole process make everybody involved with it, unclean. It's thus far. But what is interesting is that we have this whole thing takes place outside the camp. That means usually a priest don't step outside the camp except for two reasons, somewhat. And he stepped to some basically, borderline, pretty much outside, but not really too far. Two reasons he would step outside the camp, pretty much, and a normal thing. And one that has what we call leprosy, Sarai. All right, you gotta check on him. He's out there. All right, he's outside the camp. And now we have this particular process, the whole process of preparing this here red heifer is done outside the camp. And if he's outside the camp, he's sprinkling the blood towards the Mishkan, towards the tabernacle. It's not even touching it. It can't get anywhere past that. So it's just the act of him and towards that direction. Now we know we was laid out in four cardinal points, east, south, west, and north. So question is, which cardinal point would the priest most likely take? You could just say that for the discussion. We know where they were stationed, but which cardinal point he would take to actually sprinkle, step out the camp and perform this and do it and handle this a particular process. And it's set in a clean place. If something is outside the camp, then what would we consider clean? So these are some of the things, when we put the one that's got Sarai outside the camp because he's unclean. So what would be the clean place and then it got to be a place that is monitored. That means it got to be watched because this become a sacred, formula now. So not only is outside the camp and what we consider and what will be designated as a clean place, but this got to be safeguarded, this process, and kept. Just the ashes had to be kept. So the only other thing also that follows somewhat suit is on Yom Kippur to go for Asasel. That goat is a holy item, and he's taken, with all the sins of the children of Israel that's been confessed on about a Kohen Gadol, high priest, outside the camp by a man appointed for the time, and that guy let the goat go, and he become unclean for actually carrying that goat out. Now, mind you, the Kohen already confessed all the sins on Yom Kippur on the head of the goat. And yet, he's still handling the rest of his job during that day. Never going out to camp. Though he's doing a lot of immersion on that particular day, but he's still operating as normal. But the guy that takes the goat from the Kohen and goes out the camp with the goat that's for Azazel on Yom Kippur, he got to wash and bathe. He can't, because he becomes defiled by carrying it, walking out with the goat. Something to think about and consider. So these are some of the mysteries that only the Creator, knows, and basically, and they said this is, this is the quote of the Torah. This is the whole thing of the Torah. The statute of Torah, the statute of teachings. Said, if this is the statute of teachings, then it's saying that Na'aseh Wanishma, we would do and we will hear. We have performed what the Creator wants us to perform, and if possible, we'll figure it out later because that's His will. This is basically what we're doing here, but I'm just bringing out some other things, and there's a lot more discussion to go on there, but I want to touch on other subjects within this particular thing. I'm just laying some things out for you to, peruse and discuss with one another, but we're not done with this portion yet. And said, and what this actual process is for. He that touches the dead, even any man's dead body, shall be unclean 7 days. The same shall purify himself therewith on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, and he shall be clean. But if he purify not himself the 3rd day and the 7th day, he shall not be clean. Whosoever touches the dead, even the body of any man that is dead, and purifieth not himself, he hath defiled the tabernacle of the Lord. That soul shall be cut off from Israel, because the water of sprinkling was not dashed against him. He shall be unclean. His uncleanness is yet upon him. This is the law, the Torah. When a man dieth in a tent, everyone that come into the tent and everything that is in the tent shall be unclean 7 days. And every open vessel, and which hath no covering, clothes bound upon it, is unclean. And whosoever is in the open field touches one that is slain with a sword, or one that dieth of himself, or a bone of a man, or a grave, shall be unclean 7 days. For the unclean, they shall take the ashes of the burning, of the purification from sin, and running water, we use the word mayim kaim here, shall be put therein thereto in a vessel. And a clean person shall take hyssop and dip it in the water and sprinkle it upon the tent and upon all the vessels and upon the person that were there, upon him that touches the dead bone, or the slain, or the dead, or the grave. And the clean person shall sprinkle upon the unclean on the 3rd day and on the 7th day. And on the 7th day he shall purify himself. And he shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water. And he shall be clean at evening. All right. So this 19th verse is something that one should pay close attention to in reference to the process, because there's some views, that if the guy actually sprinkled, which is more of a some type of rabbinic view, that the guy that actually sprinkled with that on the unclean person, he's clean. I don't hold to that particular viewpoint, and basically picking it up from this particular verse. But the man that should be unclean, the man that should be unclean and should not purify himself, that soul shall be cut off from the midst of the assembly, because he hath defiled the sanctuary of the Lord. The water of sprinkling hath not been dashed against him. He is unclean. and it shall be a perpetual statute unto them. And he that sprinkleth the water, a sprinkling, shall wash his clothes. And this is point verse, 21st verse of the 19th chapter. And it shall be a perpetual statute unto them. And he that sprinkleth the water, sprinkling, shall wash his clothes. And he that touches the water of sprinkling shall be unclean until evening. And whatsoever the unclean person touches shall be unclean. And the soul that touches him shall be unclean until the evening. All right. So, certain defilement. A person touches their body. I can't see anything. Just like a person ate something unclean. You know, usually a woman that's going through a needle period is, it's some physical evidence. A person that's going through Zurishaddai, it's some physical elements, But here, I don't see any physical elements. And one of the things is that when people, I know a lot of people do, different laws and different customs. I come from a place that if we went to a funeral, anything like that, whether it's a funeral parlor or the gravesite, we know we don't have this in place today. So we perpetually unclean, whether we stayed out 7 days, whether we stayed out, 1,000 days, we're perpetually unclean by the dead in that sense, but it only applies when we have a sanctuary. And usually those that don't, do it, be unclean, be cut off from, it says, the congregation. Some places say the congregation, some places say from the nation of Israel. So in this case here, in certain aspects, you could be cut off from a congregation. So when we look at this law, this one of the strangest laws here in the book, and this would not take place because you got to have the Kohen to even begin to start the process. We got to have a sanctuary, such as the Mishkan itself. All right. And, and which is interesting is that they had to know about this. Though we're reading it now, they had to know about this from way back before the Mishkan was actually erected. So we got a lot of information that's, a lot of missing pieces, that's alluded to from when we read the text. All right. So, and it goes by order of, I guess, of its importance. That's why we will read it at this point in time now. But we know that they had to exist prior to the Mishkan actually being erected itself. And, that they had to have this information. But it took a moment, to go through the process. And mind you now, with the process being done, because we had battles, we had wars, we had deaths and stuff like that. And we know about people unclean in the second year with the concerning the first Pesach, and they had to institute a second Pesach. So this law is not just coming in now. This law been around for a moment, all right, from the time that they set up an institution in order for it to operate the way it works. And the process, it takes two elements. And so some of the symbolism that people will come up with in reference to this particular portion is that you got fire and you got water. Fire, a flame burns upward. So it's like from earth going, towards heaven. Water is descending downward all the time. So it's from heaven reaching earth. You take those elements, the process that fire came up with, and water, and come up with something that is used for purification. And then when it comes to the dead, it's set on the 3rd and the 7th day. Why the 3rd and the 7th day? Why not just do it on the 7th day, since it's going to take that long? It can tell you already, he shall be unclean 7 days. So why sprinkle him on the 3rd day? And why sprinkle him on the 7th day? Those questions there, people going to come up with reasonings and Kabbalists and mysticism and stuff like that in reference to, metaphorical ideas and concepts. That's good for mental calisthenics, but in actual truth, we don't know why God chose the 3rd day and why He chose the 7th day, and why the whole process making this thing is defiling, and yet it's defiling. But yet, if we was to move, like we're gonna move in the Mishkan, we're gonna move during the time of in the wilderness. So while we moving with the Mishkan to another location, those ashes must be moved to another location as well. So somebody got to carry it and safeguard it and transport it from one location to the next location. That's something to consider. All right. So the whole process. But that's all I'm going to speak on in that particular area there. And I'd like to go into the 20th chapter and focus on a few things. But it's a lot more to discuss. And when we look into the process, I hopefully I left some things for you to definitely to peruse and discuss in more detail. All right. So in the 20th chapter of Numbers, it says, "And the children of Israel, even the whole congregation, came into the wilderness of Zin in the 1st month, and the people abode in Kadesh, and Miriam died there and was buried there. All right. And the congregation, and there was no water for the congregation. And they assembled themselves together against Moses and against Aaron. And the people strove with Moses and spoke, saying, would that we had perished when our brethren perished before the Lord." Now, before I go to the 4th verse, all right, what's interesting, now, this is the 1st month. All right. So now this is the beginning of the 40th year. So last Sidra, we was in the 2nd year of Israel's journey. Within the 2nd year. And we was told that we're going to be wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. But we already in the 2nd year. So God gave us some good time, as I say, time, He didn't exact the whole 40 years out of us. But nevertheless, now in the 40s, we got a whole new generation of people. Miriam dies. Miriam, the older sister of both Aharon and Moshe. According to rabbinic literature, they place an age basically at 6 years older than Moses, which would be 3 years older than Aharon, which usually a child be weaned, at 3, where they mostly don't need any more breast milk, just eating regular food. My personal view, from my background, I would say she was at least 9 years older than Moses, 8 at the minimum, because of the maturity that she exhibit, in that sense. So, but that's neither here nor there, because we don't have any record in Tanakh exactly how much older she was over Aaron. All right. I'm not saying what what the rabbinic view is 6. What my view would be more likely would be 8 or 9, and I like the number 9 more so. So I would think she'd be 9 years older than Moshe because of her astuteness and stuff like that. And also, at the very minimum, and that's at the very minimum, I would say, because in some instances, according to rabbinic viewpoints, if you consider one of the midwives her, even in training, you would say she had to be a lot older than that. So I tend to, from my background from Beni Zakim, we tend to be more into what the texts say. And if I have, a viewpoint, or I listen to a viewpoint or from a rabbinic tradition, midrash, whatever case, CHOKMAH, or anything like that, then, if I, I listen, I think about it and see if, if it's basically a viewpoint that I can truly adhere to. All right. Not saying I'm, any great sage in myself, but the thing is that people was always had, the ability to think freely, just like free will. You had the ability to think freely. So and I like to share that with people that might listen. So and as I said in the past, I tell my children, when you study Tanakh, study the text. Think about what you read in the text. See what views and ideas and thoughts you have concerning the text, and then go into Mishnah, Gemara, Midrash, stuff like that there, and other commentaries, and see do it align with your thoughts. If their thoughts is better, then accept it freely. And if you don't think it align with your thoughts, then that's neither here and there, because all we're compelled to observe, basically, not so much to figure out everything in Torah, but to understand the laws that we must, adhere to. That was most important. So even if we have a misunderstanding on how we observe a certain law, and we listen to, the rabbinic viewpoints on observing certain law, and that's really important to pay attention to, because you basically have only 7 positive commandments that the rabbis instituted, and it's a bunch of, I forget how many offhand, but it's more than 613 negative commands, prohibitions that they institute, and since they have a lot of prohibitions that they institute, they become like seyagim, which is fences. In other words, they keep you from encroaching upon violating a real command. So this is like a safeguard. But anyway, so much for that. But let's go back here now. At this point, I don't want to, I digress a little bit. So when Miriam died, they say the water was in her merit. So it's 3 things they say. The well was in the merit of Miriam. That's rabbinically, I must say. The manna was in the merit of Moshe, and the cloud was in the merit of Aharon. All right. So just I will get back to that. No, I better say this now because I might not get back to it. So long as Miriam was around, they had no problem with water. All right. Moses was in the merit for him that he had manna, and Aharon, the cloud of glory, and hovered over the Mishkan. All right. Because the first time you read about it actually taking up places when Aaron was in the spot. But then the cloud was in existence before we even had that. So as we read, the manna came, 30 days after pretty much the first Pesach that we observed in Egypt. We had a water problem when we come through the Yam Suf first with water in front of us, and then it split. So some people, refer to that in reference to Miriam, Miriam that split, whatever the case is. But we had a water problem after we come through the Yam Soup, where the water was brackish, it was bitter. I don't know if it's anything like Flint, Michigan's water, but that they had a problem with. But Moses was able to throw a particular, tree in there and it made the water sweet. And then later on, that you find out later, which is sometime later, that Moses had to strike a rock and get water. And Miriam was around all that time, the first time, 40 years ago. So that's why I caution people that might listen to me share some insights into the reading that, we got to really think things through, and everything that you might read, and, midrashically or anything like that. Is it metaphorically, speaking, is this actual, truth straight across the board? So I'm not trying to denigrate anything on the other side. I want to, make it perfectly clear. I'm not trying to denigrate. I just want, to ensure that, people be really, really astute in their studies. When you read Tanakh, when you read the scriptures, and you read the episodes in the scriptures, that you can pay a little bit more closer to the details. All right, so much for that. But now, get back over here. She dies, and they buried her. A woman great as that, that's only, we get a one-liner. She's dead, and she's buried. And she was famous. She was the first, as we're going to get to later on in this area, I said, and she had, after crossing on the Yam Suf, Yashir and Moshe, then Moses sang, and then BINAH Yisrael, the children of Israel, sang, and the children of Israel. And then Miriam led the women with tambourines and dance. So she amped it up even more, in the sense that Moses just sang and the men sang. But when Miriam led the women, they had musical instruments, which are tambourines. So, and they sang and they danced. So they amped it up far more with greater praise. And, and the praise even included God, So this is one of the great things when we talk about that, and that's a part of the everyday Shakarit more and doing in prayer is that song that was sung at the sea. All right. So then to be buried like that with no other explanation, no great, mourning, eulogy, and you talk about a month, which would be the month of our first observance of a calendar. The marking of the Aviv, the month of Aviv, and then Pesach is right there. Now, according to rabbinic literature, they say she died on the 10th of the month of Aviv, which, I don't see it here, but I'm just saying, according to that, I'm just sharing these insights out. All right. So, and she's just buried, and that's it. And then the congregation, and what's interesting, there's some against Moses and against Aaron, but yet the people strove with Moses. Now, why not continue to strive with Aaron? They strove with Moses. So who offered the greatest resistance? That's what you got to think about. Was it Moses offering the greatest resistance? Even though they strove with them, some of stuff against them. All right. So the people got together against them, but the real strife, the real behemoth strength was against Moses. that is something to consider as we go forward. And then it goes on and say in the 4th verse, why have you brought the assembly of the Lord into this wilderness to die there, we and our cattle? And wherefore have ye made us to come up out of Egypt to bring us up to this evil place? There's no place of seed or of figs or of vines or of pomegranates, neither is there any water to drink. Now, before I get to the 6th verse, I want to focus on this, and hopefully I can cover a lot of territory in a short moment. And the reason I read these particular portions here like this is because there's certain details that I like people to focus on. All right, now it mentions certain types of fruit, but then we read after they had the issue with the bitter water and the rock and all that stuff in the early part of Exodus, and around Exodus, the early part, that around 17, something like that, that they wind up seeing 70 palm trees with several wells, date trees, matter of fact, date palm trees. That means there was some fruit there. So it wasn't just a dry desert. They actually had 70 palm trees they encountered in the early part of their traveling, complaining. And yet you have fruit there. So they mentioned the other fruit as opposed to that, and they ain't going to stop there, with the other fruit. And then they say, they died like their brethrens. Thirst is a horrible death. It's long process, to be thirsty. Those that fast on any fast day know the first thing that usually hits you is not the hunger pains, but the thirst pain, that thirst. So that's which the fast of this month, coming up soon, 17, for those times are written. And what's interesting is that they included their cattle, the water for them or their cattle, to die of thirst. Well, it's not like we vegans. It's not like we don't eat, meat. But it's your income. You worry about your income, that you worry about, keeping them alive too, so you can slaughter them later. We're sacrificing cattle. We're eating cattle. And yet we're thirsty, and we're talking about and nothing for us to drink or our cattle to drink. All right. Well, they said righteous men regard the life of his beast, but this is the an element that to consider. And then to die like our brothers in the wilderness, is who they talking about? They're talking about the rebellion that we had prior, the prior rebellion that we just read with Korah, Nathan, and Abiram. Dathan and Abiram, rather. I said Nathan. Dathan and Abiram. So that first rebellion, the ground opened up, boom, over with. Those 250 guys burnt, over with, quick, fast. Not a slow death, but a quick death. So they saying right here that we wish we would have died instantaneously so we don't have to suffer before we die. You're torturing us. We're going through torture. This is right now. Now the order of events. And this is all in the 40th year. So they may remember back 30-some odd years ago, the rebellion of Nathan, of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. They remember that. They remember the 250 princes that died 40, 30-some years ago. They still remember that. It's fresh in their mind. And they say, we wish at this point to be like them. Now, this is Israel. As we go for a little bit further, let me try to step it up a little bit more. And Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the assembly unto the door of the tent of meeting, and fell upon their faces, and the glory of the Lord appeared unto them. And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, take the rod and assemble the congregation, thou and Aaron thy brother, and speak ye unto the rock before their eyes, that it give forth its water. The rock have water, and thou shalt bring forth to them water out of the rock, so thou shalt give the congregation and their cattle drink. And Moses took the rod from before the Lord as he commanded him, mind you, as God commanded him. And Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock. And he said unto them, Hear now, ye rebels, are we to bring forth water out of this rock? And Moses lifted up his hand and smote the rock with the rod twice, and water came forth abundantly, and the congregation drank and their cattle. And the Lord said unto Moses and Aaron, Because ye believe not in me to sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore ye shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them. These are the waters of Meribah, where the children of Israel strove with the Lord, and he was sanctified in them. Now, what's important is, when we read it in English, and if you don't pay any class attention, but it's very clear in Hebrew, that the job was Moses and Aaron to speak to the rock. Not just Moses alone. It was both their job to speak to the rock together in unison. Moses was supposed to take the staff. Now, what staff he's taking? And there's a lot of controversies and volumes about concerning that particular staff. But that Moses had a different staff than the one Aaron used, and when he was chosen as the Kohen, or was it the same exact staff? And then why take the staff in the first place? Always another question. If I'm not going to use the staff, what is the purpose of bringing the staff? Is it a lesson for me or a lesson for the children of Israel? In that sense, or is it a lesson for both? In that sense. So, usually, my learning edification is not just for me alone, but for society to learn as well. People to be around me, whatever goes on in my life. So Moses told to get the staff and go there and to the rock, and the rock will give forth water. Now, since when we did this thing 40 years ago, you had the elders traveling with them, and God said, I would be there. And you strike the rock. And now you don't have those 70 elders. It's you and your brother. You just lost your sister. And since you just lost your sister, and not too long ago, did you get over it? A leader can't afford to say, my problems is bigger than the people I'm chosen to lead, in front of. A leader don't have the option. A leader, could have problems, could have domestic problems. Most leaders in the book, pretty much, that have poor relationships, with their significant others. That's don't have to be, but more often than not, that's usually the case. And one of the great balancing acts is that you could still lead and have a great relationship in life. All right. So now, this sister was dear to both Aharon and Moses, and she's called a prophetess in herself. The whole nation even waited for her for 7 days. When she had Sarai, they wouldn't even move for 7 days. And God was kind enough not to force them to move for 7 days, to wait on Miriam because of the greatness of her status and what she did and contribute. And yet she's buried, and we don't read anything concerning that. So now And they felt that way, and Moses had to have a close relationship with this, even though they talked about him, they had a family fallout, he gave a command to God to heal her now. That's how much a relationship that Moses had with his sister and concern for, and Aaron himself, So they really had a deep, love for their sister. So when we say Kaddish, for a person rabbinically, the first 7 days is very, very, very deep, and then you got a 30-day period, which is not quite as solemn, and then you continue, all the way up to the 11th month, of saying Kaddish for the individual. So you wean yourself off. We're already in the 40th year. We're already in the first month. We're gonna find that, how much of an impact, emotional impact they would have on these guys. And sometimes people that you lead in may not be sensitive to, you have issues, you have needs as a leader, but yet you got to be always concerning their particular needs. So this is, one of the things about leadership. That's what most people that really become, very, very, very good leaders never really wanted the job, really don't want to be held in that area. It's usually the ones that's really not so much of a good leader, buck hard to get into that position, But most leaders that's really good, you really work. We had a saying in BINAH, there's no nobility without responsibility. So as we look here in this particular portion, we find that, all right, God said, they didn't believe, they believe that what they didn't believe, they automatically know God exists. They know automatically God is able, and then what's some of the lessons we can learn? I was mentioning about the staff earlier. They got some things where they think that, Moses' staff actually was a sapphire. But anyway, a sapphire made of sapphire, which is stone, hard stone. Most precious stones are hard, but I'm not going to focus on that. The staff that Moses had, Aaron had used the staff in Egypt. The same staff. This is the view, I use and other commentaries use as well. But this is the view I grew up under. It's the same staff that Moses had when he first encountered, the angel in the fiery bush, and God spoke to him directly, at the bush. And he cast that staff down and became a serpent. That's the same staff that he handed to Aaron. That Aaron did the work before the magicians of Pharaoh and cast it down, and it became, a serpent. And to say that and show you that it's the same staff is because it says that his rod ate up, Aaron's rod. I think Aaron's rod ate the other rod. So that's the same staff that Aaron cast down. That became that. That's the same staff that Moses raised up. When the Yom Suf split. That's the same staff that he hit the rock, 40 years ago. 40 years ago. And when the people were murmuring about water, and the rock split and gave forth its water. Now they said, wow, how do wood break stone? All right. The same staff and rebellion to quench the people at concerning the Kohanim, who gonna be the priests. That's the same staff that was dry, dead wood, no life in it, bringing forth not only a bud, a flower pebble, but also an almond that ripened in one night. That's that same staff. That's the same staff that was told to put up. Let me go back just a little bit in the 19th, 18th chapter, just a little bit to share concerning this. 17th chapter, the 25th verse. Just and it's the 17th chapter of Numbers, the 25th verse. And the Lord said unto Moses, put back the rod of Aaron before the testimony, to be kept there for a token against the rebellious children, that they may be made an end of their murmurs against me, that they die not. Thus did Moses, as the Lord commanded him, so did he. All right. So then what is Moses' sin? He didn't speak to the rock. He didn't do what God commanded. And therefore God didn't get the praise, from him before the eyes of the people. Moses was supposed to sanctify God in the eyes of the people, and speak to the rock. As I said in the past, if the rock would listen and people didn't listen, would that make the rock? Would it make it better than the people? And could Moses and Aaron could have been concerned concerning that? Or was they caught up in their emotions? Well, we know automatically from later going to Deuteronomy that Moses didn't really want that kind of outcome where he was going to die on that side of the land, of the Jordan. So, and I'm gonna skip past a couple of things here, and when you talk about looking for passage, but one of the things we could think about is that just like something without life given life, the rock, the stone, is without life, but yet it was going to give something that's necessary for life. And God didn't have a problem with the people giving the people water, in that sense. And God said, "You're supposed to sanctify me in their eyes," because the people consider themselves, the congregation of the Lord. Still, so they use phrases like that, and then we're gonna skip on down here, and we refuse the passage from brother Esau, and Esau said he come out with us, against the story from the 14th verse all the way down to the 21st verse in the 20th chapter. So, children of Edom refused to let us go by, and we was getting ready to, they said they'd come out with us, come out against us with their sword. Now, the sword was what Isaac blessed them with. He didn't bless Yaakov with the sword. He blessed Esau with the sword. And by a sword he shall live. So it's miracles that we could be the children of Amalekites, and we could be actually any other Edomites later on, even in David's time, because their sword is how they lived. They was good with it. They was blessed with that. Even so much so when we get down the line to the Babylonian captivity, Edom had his throne sitting out there. That means he was a man of status amongst the Babylonian Empire, their nation. But anyway, let's move on down to the 22nd verse of the 20th chapter. And it said, "And they journeyed from Kadesh, and the children of Israel, even the whole congregation, came unto Mount Hor. And the Lord spoke unto Moses and Aaron in Mount Hor." So they both got word from the Creator, "by the border of the land of Edom, saying, Aaron shall be gathered unto his people, for he shall not enter into the land which I have given unto the children of Israel, because ye rebel against my word at the waters of Meribah." So they didn't do what God told them to do. So when people ask, well, what is their actual sin? Disobedience, in a nutshell. And believing that the people deserve what they asked for. Disobedience in a nutshell, and believing that God would, and it's strange that you would say, "Because you believe it not in me." Moses at the very beginning said, "The people will not believe me." And yet, towards the end of his life cycle, he had a lack of belief. What area, how much, and what for? we know he still obeyed God beyond that point. We know he even petitioned God, to get into the land and more than once after this point. And all this is taking place in the 40th year. So, and it said that the 25th verse of the 20th chapter, and it said, take Aaron and Eleazar his son, and bring them up unto Mount Hor, and strip Aaron of his garments, and put them on Eleazar his son. And Aaron shall be gathered unto his people, and shall die there. All right. That's a strange term, to be gathered, be gathered, in the Hebrew, when you look at the words and stuff like that, it's very, very interesting to check the word and the verb in these different areas here in Hebrew, and do the translation for those that actually speak the Hebrew. But one of the things is that Hor is another word for mountain. So when they say Hor, it's like the mountain of mountains. It's not really that tall, So what makes it the mountains of mountains is because of the event that takes place there. So that's what makes it the mountain of mountains in this sense. And you got the first Kohen going up there to die. You say, well, why he had to go up there to die? Why couldn't it die down in the valley? There's a lot of people that died over the period of time, and they didn't die in the mountains, let's say. So now we got a lot of unmarked graves, but his grave, you think would have been marked? And they say Miriam was up in the mountain. Miriam grave site is, was out there with everybody else. And it's interesting that all three of the major family, Miriam, her brother, Aaron, and Moses, all going to die on that side of the Jordan. That's a very interesting thing to consider. And then one of the things is that he's going to be stripped of his garment. And God told Moses, he spoke to Aaron and Moses, but he told him to bring Eleazar up. I mean, Ithamar is not included in this here. So Ithamar don't get a chance to even see his father off for the very final moment. Only one son get a chance to see his father off at this final moment. So when we look at some of the touching scenes that's going on here, and he's being stripped and adorn his son. So one of the great things is saying, well, at least I could pass my legacy on to my son, like I was promised by the Creator. That's the only, say, bittersweet in that area there, that Aaron is knowing right there that not only I'm going to die, I don't feel sick, I ain't got no ailments. I walked the mountain. I walked up on the mountain. I'm 123 years old. I walked up here. I wasn't carried up. I wasn't out of breath. I didn't have an asthma attack or anything like that. And yet I'm told to take off my garments and give it to my son. It had to be a good fit. A unique fit in that sense. And imagine Eleazar himself, knowing that I'm coming up here and I'm wearing the garment, but my father looked healthy. Now I know he's supposed to die, but he don't look like one person that's ready to die. Can you imagine that? He ain't looking like the guy that's got cancer or anything like that and he's ready to die. And he's 3 years older than Moses. And it goes on to say, and Aaron should be gathered and people die there. Now, gather to his people, what do that mean? What kind of expression is that? We know he ain't gonna leave from that spot. So these are some of the things, discussed. And that's in the 27th verse. And Moses did as the Lord commanded, and they went up into the mountain, and into Mount Hor, in the sight of all the congregation. I mean, everybody see him going up there. Nobody else following them. All right. And Moses stripped Aaron of his garments and put them upon Eleazar his son. And Aaron died there in the top of the mountain. And Moses and Eleazar came down from the mountain. Now, interesting thing. We read about the red heifer. All right. We read about that already. So now they're up in the mountain. Aaron going to die there. How close was it? When they took the clothes off of Aaron and put them on his son in that particular order, after that, then Aaron died. Aaron didn't die in the Kohen clothes. the clothes was already stripped off of him and put on Eleazar, his son. So the son was already adorned. Now, mind you, all of them was anointed at the same time. Now we know, according to the law we read earlier, that a Kohen is not supposed, a Kohen Gadol, not supposed to even be defiled for mother or for father or mother, in that sense. Because the anointing oil's on his head, and yet we got Eleazar, who was anointed with his father, but now adorned the robe for that particular office already. Is he truly the high priest yet before he come down, or not? In the presence of the Creator, when the Creator is telling him to put it on now, at that point in time, or do he have to wait? And these are some things you discuss. Do he have to wait till you get back down to the Mishkan for Moses to pour oil on his head? Now, another thing, the burial, in that sense. Who would do the burying of Aharon? We know Moses went up by himself, so God had to bury him. But who would do the actual burying? They didn't come up with spade and shovels and stuff like that up on the mount to actually dig anything like that. So what kind of burial would go take place for, the priest and Aharon? And then when he take off the clothes, right there, all right, what was the space between them and Moshe? And then when they say, and they use the plural a lot, we're going up, but they use the singular coming down, but yet they talk about this, that, we use the singular word, right, which is to come down in the singular, Moses and Eleazar. It should have been in the plural. Why in the singular? In that sense, when they both came down. So when we look and do our investigation, and that it's something, and it's volumes of commentaries on this particular event, but maybe then this is warrant a lot of discussion in that sense, because could it be that God, to show, the love and the care that, we know traditionally they say he buried Moses. We know traditionally that, according to rabbinic legends, that, Moses supposed to have buried Aharon. If Moses would have buried Aharon, coming back down, it'd have been okay if he became somewhat unclean in that sense. But we don't get that kind of impression here. And this is my view, and mind you, this is just, Crown Prince view, in reference to this, that I would say that, when Aaron was ready to die, there was enough distance between them that the ground, he died, God opened up the ground and closed it back up, just like he did those guys, Dathan and Byron and Korach, when nobody had to actually be defiled when they died and went into the ground. That's my view. But y'all can discuss it further. But, that's the view I would share with people, that the ground would just open up like it did with Korah, Dathan, and Byron, and then shut right down. And nobody was defiled by their death, because nobody had any input within it. And Moses get away from them. So I would say that'd be the same thing in this particular case here, and then when they came down, and Eleazar dressed different, than Moshe. Now I wonder what the people thought. They knew he was going to die, but when they see him going up wearing his garments, they know, all right, we ain't got a replacement yet. But you see his son coming back with the garments on, different garments on, and Moses coming down, now the people, this, I'm going to share this midrash, because I like the story, but this is just a midrash story. Just people, and to show you the difference between, and I want to point out that though they gathered to Moses and Aaron about the water, they strove with Moses, they didn't strive with Aaron, because it's a people guy. So the thing is that one of the midrash say that when Eleazar and Moses come back down from the mountain, and Aaron's not with them, that the people was about ready to have an uprising because they thought they killed the high priest. Because Aaron was their guy. That's he was the people love. So he come up there, and y'all leave him, and y'all coming back, and the son wearing his clothes. We didn't care for Moses didn't care for as much, but they cared about Al-Haron, in that sense. And yet, they say, according to the Midrash, that they seen a sepulchre going across the sky, and they realized that God's the one that actually, took care of Al-Haron. So that's one of the Midrash I always think is a touching story, because a lot of people will say, all right, we know he's supposed to die, but why he left his body up there right there? How come only all went up there? I mean, we like him as well. And so in the 29th verse, and when all the congregation saw that Aaron was dead, they wept for Aaron 30 days, even all the house of Israel. Now, what is interesting, and before I go into this last little portion, is that you find that Aaron himself, was mourned by everybody. That's why I say call Yisrael. All the congregation, right? The house of Israel, right? Where they don't use that with Moses when he go. The word call is not used there. So, it shows the difference between the relationship between Al-Haron, who's with the people all the time, as opposed to Moses. Then we go into the thing about it was attacked when we was attacking in the 21st chapter, and after his attack, the people, asked God, give them the strength to, destroy these Canaanites, and we destroyed them, and they burned down the whole town. They didn't take nothing of that, just burn the whole town. But I want to go into the 4th verse of the 21st chapter, and it says, and they journeyed from Mount Hor, by the way, the Yam Suf, to pass the land of Edom, and the soul of the people became impatient because of the way. And the people spoke against God. Why are you getting impatient now? You've been out there for 40 years almost for 40 years. Now what's the hurry? Because Aaron's gone? That's the hurry? When we, it didn't take the guys 40 years ago to get on the other side. So what's the hurry? And then goes and spoke against God and against Moses. Wherefore have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no bread and there is no water. And our soul loatheth this light bread. Now, no bread, no water. You just had water. Just got the and said no bread. Well, we know we had no bread for a while, and just like water wasn't an issue for 40 years. I mean, well, most of the 40 years, and the bread wasn't an issue for most of the 40 years. So now, because of your impatience, you say, I need something to complain about. I look for something to complain about. And this is our people, Israel. So in leadership, you can say, this is our folks, man. We know this for real as our folks, because we experience certain things, but they bicker over little stuff. And it said that, and the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and much people of Israel died. I mean, some of them had left already. They don't give you the number yet. And the people came to Moses and said, we have sinned because we have spoken against the Lord and against thee. Pray unto the Lord that he take away the serpents from us. And Moses prayed for the people. Not pray that they be forgiven. Pray stop the punishment. This is something we got to look at. I don't think I need to be forgiven, but I need you to stop the punishment. That's important. And Lord said to Moses, make a fiery serpent and set it upon a pole. Now Moses never, on a pole, and it shall come to pass that everyone that is bitten, when he seeth it, shall live. And Moses made a serpent of brass and set it upon a pole, and it came to pass as if the serpent had been any man, when he looketh unto the serpent of brass, he lived. And the children of Israel journeyed and pitched in a boat. All right. So right then and there, that we find that this serpent, which became a symbol for medical doctors to this very day. Old barbershops stopped using the serpent and started using just a stripe around a pole. But basically, it was, the medical field. You might find a Hippocratic oath in some old school doctor's place, and the serpent on top of a pole with wings. But it was a brazen serpent, it's interesting that why look at the serpent? Why look up to the serpent? Why not look up to God? In that sense, and the people request was to stop the serpent. Pray to God to stop these fiery serpents from killing us. That's a strange request. They acknowledge their sins, but they never, everything like that. But then, in that sense, but then they ask for the strong, fully forgiveness. And then it gets the 13th verse, which is an interesting point I like to bring out. And from thence they journeyed and pitched on the other side of the Arnon, which is in the wilderness that cometh out of the border of our Amorites. For Arnon is the border of Moab, between Moab and the Amorites. Wherefore it is said, in the book of the war of the Lord, behave in Suphah, and the valley of Arnon, and the slope of the valleys that incline towards the sea of Ar, and leaneth upon the borders of Moab. All right. So now the things I want to bring out is that war. It says Sefer Milkamot, Hashem. Sefer Milkamot Hashem. All right. So the war of the Lords is a book. They say there's a lot of debate about whether it's an actual book or Sefer itself being taken in accounting of all the wars that the children of Israel fought on behalf of God throughout their travels. So I'm not going to speak much on it, but it's being spoken on whether it's an actual book that was lost. Some say it was an actual book. Some say Rashi would just say it's just accounting of a collection of wars in order that we have. But we have a lot of books that's mentioned on that other things. People say they actually saw or read that was lost over a period of time. So, but it's strange that they insert this here, but the wars of the Lord, and we're just talking about one battle here. All right, we're talking about one battle. So it's just something to discuss more. And then there's a song at the well. And from there, the bear at the well, bear, which means a well, that is a well where the Lord said unto Moses, gather the people together, and I'll give them water. Then sang Israel this song. All right. And this 17th verse is almost very similar to the song in the 15th chapter of Exodus that's said every day, except, Moses' name is omitted and the Creator's name is omitted. And the Creator gave him water, and then the people sung this song. They didn't give Moses any credit. And I don't know, there's a lot of opinions why God's name is omitted from there. I'll let you discuss that with himself. But then he had the last two fights, the major fights with Sihon, king of Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan. And they had, which was interesting because the Haftorah, Yiftach, is normally, goes along with this particular Citra Chukat. And when we look at the Haftorah Chukat, is having this fight because Sihon is the one that actually beat down Moab and took their territory. And we find that right here. So when Yiftach look at the Haftorah, you find that the information that Yiftach is drawn from is from here. Now, 300 years is a little bit extensive for his time period, in that sense. But he gave credit to the guy Balak as being more powerful than the king Ammon that he's getting ready to deal with in the Haftorah. And he said, you didn't come all this time. And then that we read that Sihon bragged about his power. And then Og was another giant and had sons. So they actually defeated and sung about how they beat down Moab made them fugitives. If you're a fugitive, that means you ran, and made also their daughters captive in the song. So he had his bragging rights, he said, hit me up a melody about me, you know what I mean? And let it go out throughout the land. So he was doing a lot of bragging. And when it comes to Og, King of Bashan, which is part of this, um, part of the prayers that we say pretty much every day, is that Og himself, Moses was actually afraid of him. So God told him, don't be afraid of him. Can you imagine Moses, the man of God, actually afraid of another man? That's why God told him, fear him not. That's not empty words. That's saying, look here, I know what's going on up in there. You know what I mean? Just like when we came out of Egypt, said, look here, you think these people's ready? Now, if they see war, they're going to turn back. You know what I mean? That's why he had to leave in a hurry, because they might change their mind. So Moses himself, great as he was, had fear, and God told him, don't fear him not, because, you can handle it. So that's, I hope you got something about what I said. I know I came, highlighting, I might spend a little time here and there on that, but it's worth going over the stories, and plus also going over the meanings of the names and the songs and the testimonies that Seacon and all of them just bring about, because those names has a lot of impact. Got words like a boat, fathers and stuff like that. So, and so you make, correlation between that and see what you can come up with when you discuss it with your teachers and colleagues. With that, I hope you got something out of what I said. Any mistakes been my own, and I can reach y'all, Shalom Aleichem, early Shabbat Shalom.
Two quick little things, Nasik. Do you feel do you think the transfer of power was seen by the people in terms of when Aaron took off his clothes? Like, was it a visual thing for the people to see? And I believe that maybe they exchanged clothes. Maybe Aaron was buried with what Eleazar had on. So that's just an opinion. And,
Okay, all I can give is an opinion too.
but do you think that the transfer of power was seen? And also, when it speaks about the rebels, the word that it uses is morim, right?
Right.
So from Mara, right? And then Mara, that means bitter. So was it more that there was bitter people more so than rebels?
Well, it's both, a combination of both, and also teacher more is also a similar root too as well. But
The similar root, right?
yeah, it's actually the same root, not
Right.
simple, just a different
Mara,
context, but one that shows the way,
Right.
So it's like one that gives insight,
Right.
in that sense, just like Torah, hurrah,
From Yada, right? Like Yada, I think like the infinite root is
Torah,
like Yada or so.
yeah. All right,
Someone
so
that pours, or you pour something into someone. I think that's the
But to get back to your question, the thing is that God told Moses only who's supposed to come up.
Okay.
You know what I mean? You know, so Aaron and and Moses, told to die, and then only Aaron's son was allowed to go up. So that's why we know that nobody's seen what went on up there. You know what I mean? So when the people said they've seen that Aaron was dead, that's why the midrash come in between that little gap. How you see him if you ain't up there? Only 3 people went up, 2 people come down. And it's a similar thing with Abraham when in the binding. He brought Isaac, and his couple of servants with him, but only, him and Isaac went up, but then Abraham came down. So there's a similar theme in that area there, and also the was the nakedness. We always in the naked that come in the world, naked is return to the womb. Job makes that clear. Naked I come out of my mother's womb, naked I shall return. We wrap the body out of decency or modesty. We might wrap the body because it's like we don't want to throw no dirt on an individual or whatever the case like that. Just leave them like that. In that sense. So we call ourselves clothes in the body and wrapping the whole thing up. But basically, that's the essence of it. And then this is in the presence of all highest.
Hallelujah. Torah about Nasik, thank you for the insight. May the Most High God bless you. May the Most High God bless each and every one of you. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. And Yah willing, we'll see y'all the next time. Shalom, shalom. Hallelujah.
Shalom.
Let's get knowledge, wisdom, understanding. We'll do our standing. All praises to the Most High, His laws and commandments. The hot CHOKMAH BINAH here to push it through your speakers. Judgment, truth, and love should be coming from the leaders. Yeah, knowledge, wisdom, understanding. We'll do our standing. All praises to the Most High, His laws and commandments. The hot CHOKMAH BINAH here to push it through your speakers. Judgment, truth, and love should be coming from the leaders.